Hello, and welcome to Lore Watch, a roundtable freeform discussion about lore and our favorite video games. I'm your host, Joe Perez, one of several lore-focused folks at Blizzard Watch, and I've got my stupendous co-host with me today, Matt Rossi. How you doing today, Matt?
I am okay.
Yep. Hey, okay is better than not okay, especially in these times. So today we're going to be talking about another non-Blizzard IP, and this one has actually been requested multiple times, not just by you, our wonderful patrons who support us and allow us to do shows like this, but also some of our editors. So, it's kind of on everybody's mind right now because there's another game in the series coming out in just a few weeks at the time of this recording. We're going to be talking about Horizon Zero Dawn. Now, what this is going to mean for you is there are going to be spoilers contained herein for this game if you have not played it yet and are kind of, waiting to play it yourself to get through the story. Although this game has come out in 2017, did just release on PC not too long ago, actually, if I remember correctly. Last year.
So we've had a whole year, guys.
So I highly recommend playing it. That's going to be your spoiler-free review from me. Go play it. It's a fun game. But we're going to be talking about that game, in particular the story, because it does a lot of really interesting things with the whole post-apocalyptic genre. Matt, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. But before I do kick us off, let me ask you a question. Do we want to do this in order of appearance in the game, or do we want to do it in chronological order? Like, do we set up the background, or do we do that? Do we reveal it as we go through the discussion? Because that's an interesting aspect of this story.
Yeah, and the story does take, and for us, the story takes on kind of a different, I don't want to say meaning, but it's completely different depending on which way you approach it. I think we should do it in the manner of reveal. I think that makes the most impact. Okay,
so at the moment the game starts, you don't know when it is. You know that it is sometime. There are people. Your first sight is Rost, who is a exile from the Nora tribe, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And the Nora tribe live around a mountain, and this sacred mountain is essentially, they consider it their god. The entire area around it is their holy land, and the Nora tribe have lived there for as long as they remember. And as you watch Rost, who is an exile, he comes out of his house, his hut, and he has a baby with it. And he tells the baby that today is the day that the baby gets a name. And when I say a baby, I'm talking infant.
Yeah.
Maybe looks like maybe 3 months old. Like, this is a squalling babe, and he's got her in a carrier, and he's marching through the Nora lands, talking to the child as he goes. And that's the opening narration of the game. And as he goes, everything looks pretty, it's tribal. It's, it could be anywhere until the giant dinosaur robots show up. And then you're like, oh, okay. Like, first, it's like you see a deer jumping around. You see a lake. You see a bear. They're wandering through this mountainous region that would look familiar to anybody who's ever been in the Rockies. And then suddenly, giant dinosaur robots come smashing down. And his narration even hints that this is going to happen. He goes, beasts of the air, of the land, of the water, and of steel. And as he says, and of steel, that's when the giant robot dinosaur foot comes boom crashing down, and you start seeing robot dinosaurs. And that's your first hint that this game is not your typical, it's certainly not like your typical tribal people in the past fantasy type game, but you're still like, okay, there's robot dinosaurs. What's going on? This leads to the baby's naming ceremony, which we find out is highly controversial. Like, one of the mothers of the tribe shows up to do it. Another shows up to try and stop her from doing it, but it's too late. They've already named the baby by the time the other mother shows up. And they get into an argument over the fact that the baby is considered, one of them considers the baby an abomination, and the other just, no, she's a baby. And there's obviously hints to some mysterious
origin.
Secret. Yeah, but they don't give you any details. There's hints to it, and that's it. And the baby gets her name. Ross names the baby Aloy, and that's the opening. I think the credits come up at that point. The title card pops up at this point, and you now know the name of the game is Horizon Zero Dawn.
Yeah, the title card pops, and then time advances to the point where
where she's like 5 or 6.
Yeah,
and she is clearly. She's a smart, inquisitive child, but she's clearly being shunned by the Nora. They do not interact with her. One kid throws a rock at her.
Well, this is the part where we start learning about what an outcast is, right? So
Yeah, exactly.
as Alloy as a child, and as children often do, is going to Rost and asking essentially who her mother is, right? And I remember Ross telling her that the Nora matriarchs, the ones that live in the actual tribe that lives on the mountain, would know, but as outcasts, it is not their place to know such things. So now we know that Rost is an outcast, as is Alloy, so that they are on the fringes of society. There are people that will deal with them, but for the most part, they're just shunned by everybody that would be considered family, tribe, or friend.
Yeah, and the thing is that Aloy hasn't done anything. She was a baby. So you're like, why is this happening? And that's the central mystery of the opening of the game. You see this like in this early part where she's like 5 or 6 years old. Like I said, she interacts with some of the people of the tribe. They either run away from her, or in case one kid throws a rock at her, actually gets her, I think, once.
Yes.
Then tries to throw another one, and she catches it and throws it back and hits him in the face because she's got really good aim. This is establishing her future role to a certain degree that this child is somewhat special. As she's running away from Rost, who she goes to him and says why, and he tells her like, I can't, we don't, it's not up to us to know. She runs away and she falls into what's called a old one's ruin. And to us, to people who live in a technologically advanced society, it's pretty obviously an even more technologically advanced society than we have. Like you look at it and you're like, oh, okay, that's computers, that's a electric door, but the whole place is in ruins. But Aloy finds a little device, and it's called a focus in the game, and it is essentially like if you had like your phone, if you had like Google Glass, your phone, augmented reality, a personal data assistant, all of that in one device that you wore on your head. And it basically allows her to like, it pulls up a HUD for her. It's actually a very helpful device, and it works for her. Like she can get it to work. And that's weird because most people don't know how to make them work, especially the Nora. The Nora have very little technological aptitude. But she finds it and she likes it, and so she keeps it. And then we're into a bit where she finally gets fed up and says to Ross, I want to know who I am. And he's like, well, there's only one way that can happen. And there's a scene with them, very early scene of them dealing with some of the machines around them, because again, it's a natural wilderness type place, but there are these machines that sometimes are hostile,
and that's where you start to kind of get an idea of what like the outcasts are supposed to be doing, like what their role is, if there is a role for them. And it's sort of then you start to kind of get an idea of, here's Rost, who lives on the fringe of society. He's teaching Alloy, who for all intents and purposes is his daughter in this moment, to hunt, to survive, how to deal with the various machines, at a very young age too. Like there are tons of sequences that you go through as a young child that are all about you helping folks that are much older than you deal with these things, including children that kind of get in over their head. You're taught how to deal with the ones that seek, the ones that are looking for humans to essentially kill. It's an interesting thing because a lot of times you'll see post-apocalyptic survival games really like show the child like being protected or sheltered or like being hidden away. And here you have essentially a female child protagonist just kind of like, Ross is trying to keep her safe, but he's doing so by teaching her how to deal with things and letting her go out and do them.
Mm-hmm. Also, we should point out, unlike most quote-unquote post-apocalyptic settings, this is one where that apocalypse happened at some distant point.
Mm-hmm.
Like these are people who this is their lives. They're not hard scrabble survivors making stuff out of junk. They're people who live and
Society's
have lived
been
this
rebuilt.
way. Yeah. They are a tribal society. That's who they are. It's not, we survived nuclear war or zombies or what have you. None of them have ever even seen whatever happened. Whatever happened in some point in the past. They know very little about it. All they have are legends. Most of those legends are somewhat religious in nature. There's no evidence of what happened. Nobody really knows. They just the basic theory that most of them go with, especially among the Nora, is that at some distant point in the past, the old ones And when you were in the Nora territory, there's no evidence of the old ones except for like the occasional weird little ruin. But the old ones did something to displease the mother, the mountain itself or what have you, who they considered like an avatar of the entire world. And she struck them down. That's what they taught. That's what they teach. And there are other tribes in the world around them, but those tribes are not the Nora. The Nora don't ascribe to the same beliefs. Every tribe has its own beliefs. Up in the north, there's, I want to say the Farouk, but I can't remember if that's actually their name.
I think that's correct.
Yeah, but they actually worship the machines. They consider them to be divine. They are avatars of a Holy Spirit. And they actually have pretty good luck with this. Like up until fairly recently, they've actually been able to commune with the machines to a degree and get them to, if not do what they want, at least help out to a certain extent. And then about like, I think it was like at the time that this is being taught, something happened in the past. You find out that it was around the same time that Aloy was born. That something happened and the robots started getting more aggressive, and no one knows why. But Ross tells Aloy, after Aloy's like fed up and really wants to know, like, where's my mother? Who am I? Why do I have to live like this? Why do I have to be, an outcast? What did I do? What could I possibly have done? And Ross is like, all right, I can't answer these questions and we can't go in to talk to the matriarchs and find out why, but there is a way you can. But it's going to take you the next decade of your life to get ready for it. And she's like, yes, okay. And, the game decides to go with an oldie but a goodie, and we have a training montage. And
yeah, for a little bit of context, what Ross tells her about is something called the Proving. And it's a competition that the Noras have every so often. I don't think they actually specify how often it happens. Where if you succeed in the Proving, if you win the Proving competition, you earn the right to become a brave of the Nora tribe.
Actually, not if you win. You get to be a brave if you complete it. But if you win, you get a boon.
I was going to say, and you also get a boon. Yes.
You only get the boon if you win. You get to be a member of the tribe if you just make it through.
Yeah, well, anybody who finishes the competition is technically winning. Yeah. Anybody who finishes can become a brave, and anybody who the person who finishes first essentially gets the boon, which is when they go into the training montage that takes several years.
Yeah, like I think she's clearly 16 or 17 when she completes it. Yeah, so it's like 10, 11 years. Do you want to go from here? Because I've been talking for a bit.
Yeah. So now she, as a young woman who's been trained in archery, survival, how to deal with these mechanical monstrosities, goes to the Nora settlement and enters the competition. And you can see from the way that the folks of the Nora tribe interact with her exactly how disdainful she is to them. She is distrust and contempt by most of the villagers. And then I believe she meets a what is it? Oseram, I want to say is the person's name, who also has a focus.
I think that is his name. Yeah.
Yeah. Like she does, who acts very suspiciously, keeps her conversation very brief. And then the competition starts. And this is where the game breaks into your sort of like, here's where you can show us all the things that we just went through the tutorial with you in the training montages and show us that you know what to do. And of course, because you are the protagonist of the story, Aloy wins the Proving. But before she can be really welcomed in, the Nora are attacked by a bunch of what are hooded cultists, essentially. So most of the newly minted Braves, which is everybody who wound up going through the Proving and surviving or finishing, are killed. And here we have a moment where Aloy is almost killed by the leader of the cult, who is, again, wearing a focus just like Aloy is. And this is the moment where Ross sacrifices himself to save her. She winds up falling unconscious. And when she wakes up, one of the matriarchs explains that the cultists are a thing. They know about them, and that they've gained control of corrupted machines, which is something that, going back to what Matt talked about, where you have a tribe in the north that is being, thought to commune with the machines and the creatures and be able to work with them, being connected to a corrupted one, which would normally be put down would normally be trying to, keep away from everybody. People in civilizations are now being connected to and essentially linking with humans. This is a bad thing. And this is where Aloy starts to learn more about her birth, or at least her origin. She learns that as an infant, she was found at the foot of a sealed door. And I believe it was Alin informs her that the
Tirsa, I think.
Was it Tears about
Tirsa? Yeah, Tirsa's the one that actually tells her like what she knows,
which is admittedly not a whole lot. Essentially, it's
basically the reason that she was made an outcast is because one day the people who live inside the mountain live inside this big cave in front of the big sealed door. And they can't get the sealed door to open. Every so often they walk up to it and the door scans it and says, no. And so they're like, okay, clearly we're not worthy. But one day they heard crying and went in there into the room that there's only one entrance to as far as they know, and there's a baby. And they immediately had a debate. Why is there a baby here? Where did this baby come from? And Tirsa was like, well, obviously she put her here. The All-Mother, our God, put her here. But many of them thought she was a curse. That the Metal Devils, who are the robots that existed in the before time, as they remember it, that they must have done it. It's some kind of defilement, and nobody believed that anyone but the High Matriarchs could enter the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
So they thought the baby was not born of a human mother, and because of that, they made her an outcast. Because that's not legal. The Nora do not believe you can be born of anything but a human, and if you somehow were, you'd not be like. And they don't even think about why they have that rule, But
which comes into play later on.
Yeah, but
you start to get a hint of it, I think, right around this point too.
Yeah, but so there's Aloy, and she's told this story, and she's like, "But so you don't know who my mother is either. Nobody knows who my mother is." She walks up to the door, and the door recognizes her. But it won't let her in because something is corrupted. It says the registry is corrupted. It can't verify. It says 99.4% match, but registry is corrupted, can't allow. And so they're like, the door talked to you. And she's like, yeah, it won't let me in. And so now she's like, I don't know. I have no idea what to do with myself now. And they're like, well, if you want, there's only one way you can leave to pursue these answers. And that's if we make you a seeker. And that's a person in the Nora tribe who is given some special purpose. Is seeker's the right word, right?
I think it is seeker, but I think there's another thing that happens during the sequence that I think we should also point.
Right, when the robots start attacking.
Well, not just the robots start attacking, but there's a conversation with Olin that's really important here as well. So Olin, who is acting kind of squirrely before the cultists attacked, informs Aloy and during this transition period, during this conversation, that the cultists are part of a rebel group called the Eclipse, and he admits that he was working for them for the safety of his family. He then also indicates
that's way later.
Is it way later?
That's way later. He's not there when she comes to. He's gone. She finds out that he was the one who did it because she gets access to his focus at a later date, but she doesn't know at first how they get her image. She realizes it must have been Olin because he's the only other person who had a focus.
Sorry, folks, it's been a while since I played this game.
Yeah, I haven't played it in like a year, but I played the heck out of it. So, basically, what happens is the guy that tried to kill her dropped his he'd sent a focus signal out. There were focuses on other people who were trying to kill her. She gets one and she accesses it and realizes they have a recording of her. It's an actual recording of her talking to Olin from Olin's perspective. That's how she figures it out. She's like, wait a minute, that's me when I was talking to him because he had a focus and I saw that he had a focus and thought it was weird, so I said something. And that's what this image is. And it's that recording that shows her the image of the woman that she thinks is her mother. Because they have a picture of her side by side with this other person that she's never seen before, but who obviously has a very great resemblance to her.
Mm-hmm.
Their faces are almost identical. Different hair, obviously, because Aloy's hair is in the Nora style. This person's hair is different. This person is dressed very differently, and they've never seen anyone dressed like this, but it's still obviously very close to Aloy. And that's when she goes up to the door, and the door also says, 99.4% match, Dr. Elizabeth Sobek. And now she knows who the person is, but she still has no idea, like, who is this person? What does this person have to do with me? And that's when the robots attack. And the robots have been attacking since the cult people left. What's that cult name? The Eclipse?
The Eclipse.
Yeah, you covered that. So this is where Aloy finds out that she can, like, I don't know how to explain how this happens. Like, she figures out she can control these things.
She can interface. She can actually take control or tap into using the focus to the various machines if she does it right. And it's not everything that she can work with, but a lot of it she can.
And she makes basically a spear out of the module she pulls off of one of these things that she figures out how to use. And that spear is what she uses to take control of them when she does. So now she knows how to do that. This is where Teersa, some of them, like Lanza still hates Aloy. Lanza thinks Aloy is a curse that's going to destroy their people.
Mm-hmm.
Teersa's like, she's obviously sent by the All-Mother. This is ridiculous. She's the only one who survived that attack. She successfully performed all of her trials. She won the proving. She's one of the people who died in the attacks. One of the few people that was actually, like, kind to Aloy is the daughter of the big general of the Nora, whose name I am forgetting, and I apologize. But she died during the attack. Everybody died but Aloy. But before she died, she and Aloy were actually friendly. And as a result of this, her brother and Aloy kind of become friends, for lack of a better word. And so on her way out of the village after she's basically made a seeker because it's a way for her not to be in the tribe, because the tribe still doesn't really trust her. And she doesn't feel a great deal of loyalty to them either.
Well, especially because when the cultists attacked, they were targeting Aloy, so they don't exactly feel safe.
Yeah, and for her part, she doesn't feel particularly close to them either. The only one she felt close to was Rost, because he's the one. Like, when he came up with this plan, the day that she was going in, he even says, "This will be the last time we see each other." And she's like, "No, of course that's ridiculous. I'll come see you tomorrow." He's like, "You're not allowed. You won't be allowed to speak to me. I'm an outcast. Once you're part of the tribe, you're part of the tribe. You can't go talking to outcasts." And she's like, "Well, don't worry about it. I'll come out and it won't be you. You won't be violating anything. It'll just be me doing it." And he's like, "I don't want that for you. I want you to be part of the tribe. I want you to protect them. They're good people. Me being an outcast is not, it's not wrong." And she just can't understand this. So when he dies, she's like, "Well, that's the person I cared about. The rest of you, who are you to me?" So it's an interesting dichotomy where they basically get rid of her without actually exiling her again, because she didn't do anything to get exiled, but they find a way to get rid of her, and she takes it because she doesn't want to be there either. She wants to be out in the world finding out what happened to her, like why she's there. And so that's the basic, like, this is one of those games that has kind of like 3 starts.
Yeah.
And this is the part where the game opens up and you now have the whole world to explore. And it's a pretty big world. You want to talk about, like, what happens next? Because I mean, there's a lot that happens, and it can happen in different orders. So.
Yeah, there's a lot that happens, but I mean, I think we should try to condense it down a little bit. So now that she's a seeker, she's basically going out, and her job, at least to her, is A, to find out what's happening, B, to find out what's happening with the creatures, why these things are becoming more aggressive, why they started to become more aggressive, what's happening with the cultists, why they're starting to there, and also find out about her own past.
Oh, and there's also the fact that she is to avenge the Proving Massacre.
Yes.
That's her, like, official job. And the girl who died was named Vala.
Okay.
That was her friend, the one that was friendly to her when she came in, the one that didn't care. Bast was the one that threw a rocket at her when she was a kid. He was still being a jerk to her. But Vala was like, if you make it through here, then you'll be my tribe mate. I don't see a reason to be a jerk about this. So Vala was the one whose mother was the High General, whose brother becomes her friend. But yeah, they want to avenge the Proving Massacre. So that's the justification for sending her out. Which
includes finding Olin, if I remember correctly,
because he's the one that took the picture of her and gave it to the Eclipse, and sent them in. So yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff that can happen here. There's a lot of stuff that does happen as you're moving through the world, and as you're going through the open terrain. You can also discover other pieces of essentially ruins. You can find bits of information. But I think I'll pick up where she finds Olin, because I already started talking about that earlier, and it's kind of important. So she does catch up with Olin, and Olin informs Alloy that again, the cultists are part of a group called the Eclipse, and admits that he was working for them because he needed to keep his family safe. And he indicates that Alloy was specifically targeted because of her resemblance to an old world scientist named Dr. Elizabeth Sobek.
And we should really briefly mention before you continue.
Sure.
Olin lives in a town called Meridian, which is like a very big city for this setting. And Meridian is in a place called the Sundom, and they have their own culture. It's different than the Nora, but they're a little more advanced technologically.
A little bit, yeah.
But not like immensely so. But they're less tribal and more cosmopolitan. They're more of an urban society, and that's what Olin was doing before he got dragged into this whole cult thing. Yep. So go ahead.
And that it was basically, he saw that his focus identified her, and he was able to fire it off because for whatever reason, the cultists are looking specifically for her. They're probably looking, at this point, you can make the assumption that they're looking specifically for something like Elizabeth Sobek, because it's important to whatever is behind the sealed door, or it's important to whatever is actually happening. And when you find out that the cultists are actually linking with, corrupted creatures, corrupted monsters, or dinosaurs, whatever you want to call them, these mechanical creatures that are corrupted are being connected to the humans, there's got to be a connection there.
Yeah, and there's actually... one other thing to point out is while this is all going on, Aloy makes friends with effectively the leader of the guard in Meridian. He actually was at the proving ceremony. He was there he was there in the party that Olin was in, and he actually kind of has a crush on her. So he sort of he tells her, if you want to come to Meridian anytime, just go ahead. He introduces her to the guy who's essentially the king, and the man became king after he killed his own father, who had become a tyrant, and who was basically going into human sacrifice and all sorts of crazy stuff. His father is the one that the Eclipse effectively wanted to stay king, and when he died, they grabbed one of his sons, the brother of the guy who's currently ruling, and they're trying to prop him up as a puppet king. So all of this is important to why this cult is doing what it's doing, but it's not what's behind them, because the cult themselves are not what's behind what's going on. They're part of it, but they're not the main focus.
Yeah. I think it was shortly after this, and where in the sequence of events we find out about Farrow. Is that right?
All right. You want to do that?
We can.
All right. The Aloy eventually sneaks into an excavation. She makes the acquaintance of a man named Silence, who doesn't actually meet with her for quite some time. He's communicating with her through her focus because he has a focus, but he's had it longer and he understands it more. So he's talking to her through her focus, giving her clues without saying too much or revealing too much about himself. But one of the things he does is say, look, if you want to know what's going on, what Olin was up to, what all this is, go to this location and be on the lookout. And she goes in, and as she's exploring it, there's a whole bunch of weird stuff going on. But then she comes to a part where she finds that they're excavating something. And the thing is up to this point, the robots you've seen look like animals. Mm-hmm. They're all like robot versions of prehistoric animals of various kinds.
Which we find a reason for at some point, which I mean...
Yep, that does absolutely come up. There is a reason for it.
Let me know when I can go into that, because I like that.
Oh, yeah. But she's there, and she's like, okay, there's something weird going on here. They've got this thing on top of an old long neck, which was one of the dinosaur-looking robots, that's not working. It's been decommissioned, but there's this thing on top of it, and they're talking to it. And when she goes up there and she tries to talk to it, it reacts. It's very like, you, and it immediately homes in on her. And as she's trying to get out, she realizes that they are digging up something that is not like the machines at all. It's like the machines that attacked at the Nora compound. And she realizes it's a metal devil. It's an actual metal devil from the stories. It's real, and they're digging it up. And this weird red thing is trying to get them to do it. And so, having no idea what's going on, knowing only that things are much worse than she thought they were, and given clues by Silence, she starts going to these ancient ruins And now, Joe, come in with the
Yeah.
reason.
So this is one of the interesting. This is where the that time period that we were missing starts to really come into focus. So the ruins are actually remnants of the company, the Pharaoh Automated Solutions, and through diving through these ruins, basically dungeon diving, Aloy discovers that the old world was destroyed nearly 1,000 years ago because Pharaoh lost control of what they called peacekeeper military robots, or Red Devils. The robots, which could self-replicate.
Yeah, actually, let me go over this.
All right,
one.
go
This
ahead.
part, I just wrote a thing about this for the site. So
Go right ahead.
basically, Ted Farrow was born in 2013. And so he grew up. He'd be like 9 years old this year. So he grew up in a world with global pandemics and environmental catastrophes and all that stuff. Right around 2040, when he first dropped out of college to start his company, Pharaoh Automated Solutions, he realized that the way to go was the environment.
Mm-hmm.
Environmentally friendly, solutions were the way to go. They were the way to make money. And he got smart. He himself was brilliant at business, but he wasn't an engineer or a scientist or anything like that. But he was good at hiring people. And one of the people he hired, and you find this out as Aloy digs through these things, is Dr. Elizabeth Sobek. And Dr. Sobek built him green robots, environmentally friendly machines. And so for a long time, from about 2040 to like the mid 2060s, Ted Farrow went from kind of okay rich to stupefyingly rich to even richer than that. He became the world's first trillionaire doing this. And as part of projects he did, like one of the projects he did was he built something called Operation Firebreak, which is going to come into this later. But Operation Firebreak was a thing that they did when they realized, the super volcano is going to erupt a lot sooner than we thought it was going to. And so they fixed it. They built an AI, they put it into a geothermal facility, and they fixed the super volcano in Yellowstone so it wouldn't explode. And because he did things like that, Ted Farrow became known as the man who saved the world.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a period from between 2040 and 2060, which life was a golden age. Like all of the problems were solved. All of the horrible things that were like about to destroy the world were fixed. And then Ted Farrow decided to follow it up. He was going to make military robots.
Chariots in particular. So we can talk about the chariots a little bit before I go into the rest of this. But essentially, right after the 2060s and 2064, there was a set of military robots that started exhibiting what they call a severe glitch. It stopped responding to commands, began attacking its owner, and in response, Pharaoh instructed his programmers to use remote access to upload basically a hotfix, a patch that would bring the swarm back under control, only to be reminded of his strict instructions not to include any such access in the OS. Now, you see, that was one of the things that Pharaoh had to deal with when creating essentially these robotics, these creatures, is that there was this fear of outside hacking, this fear of somebody getting control of them. And so they literally built a way that would not happen, which now kind of bit them in the behind.
I believe at one point it said that it would take a fully functioning AI
Yep.
several hundred years to crack the encryption and shut the swarm off.
Foreshadowing much. So at this point, now with the help of Dr. Elizabeth Sobek, he asked her to come to FAS headquarters to solve the problem. And when she started to look into it, it was horrific. She informed him that the swarm had become completely independent entity, answering only to itself. This, coupled with the robot's ability to exponentially replicate and consume biomatter as fuel, meant the swarm would quickly grow to numbers beyond any hope of containment. And now, I want
you to hold on. We got to go over this.
Yeah.
But let's both of us repeat this. Let me go and then you go, because this is what bears repeating here.
Yeah.
Ted Farrow, who was many things, but he was not a scientist or engineer or technician in any way, went to his engineers and told them he wanted military robots that would do the following. A, self-replicate. There would be gigantic carrier robots that would build more of them. B, multiple alternate power sources. So you could, they could use oil, they could use solar, and in a pinch, they could consume living things, plants and animal matter, to keep going. No way to hack them. They could hack other companies' robots. So not only when you were dealing with them, not only did you have to deal with them, if you were using military robots, and everybody was in the 2060s, and they came from a different company, that company's robots were most likely going to get hacked by them.
Yep.
So yeah, that's what he told them to do. And keep in mind, he'd already, like, at this point, Elizabeth had quit the company because she didn't want to make military robots. That wasn't her deal. She was into environmentalism. So he became stupefyingly rich for exactly 10 years. And then this happened. And now I'm going to let Joe repeat it again because it really does bear repeating what he did.
So to put this into a plain and in-game context, this event of ordering military robots being made that were able to self-replicate, that could consume biomass in order to fuel themselves for an indefinite period of time, became known as the Pharaoh Plague. Because what wound up happening next is what you would exactly expect. These military robots overran the planet and began to consume the entire biosphere, stripping Earth of all life. Not all life totally, obviously, because we still have living things here, but pretty dang close.
No, Joe.
Was it completely?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's right, because that's why projects... Yep, sorry.
This is where you start finding out about Project Zero Dawn. And as first it's presented, you're like, Aloy is like, obviously they managed to stop the robots because there's life.
Turns out they didn't.
I mean... Yeah, but no. As you go through, you find out Elizabeth Sobeck comes to Ted Farrow and says, "Here's the plan I have," and he goes, "This is monstrous. I can't sign this." And she's like, "Oh, you'll sign it
because you don't have a choice.
This because if you don't sign this, I'm already on the phone with the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and I will tell them I'm in a helicopter right now going to NORAD, and when I get there, I can either get off of the helicopter and tell them that you are committing your full resources to this plan, or I can tell them that you're not." And he's like, "You don't have to threaten me." And she's like, "Apparently I do." And so he signs it, and they put Operation Zero Dawn into effect. And it looks like everyone's convinced that Operation Zero Dawn is some big plan to save the world and stop the Pharaoh Plague. But once you get through enough of these bases, you get to the last one, and you find a hologram from the general who's working on the project, and he says, "You few will learn the truth. Operation Zero Dawn is not to stop the Pharaoh Plague. That is impossible. All life on Earth is going to end at exactly this moment. This is Zero Dawn. Your job is to create the means by which life will be restored." Because here's the thing. Here's the reason that there are weird robots wandering around that look like various animals. Here's the reason why the Nora live in a mountain. The mountain they live in is NORAD.
Yep.
It's Cheyenne Mountain.
Yep.
All of this is because it would take hundreds of years to hack the swarm. So they built an AI with numerous subsidiary features, effectively sub-AIs that were slave to it. And that AI, Gaia, its entire purpose was to repopulate the planet and recreate humanity once the plague was dealt with, once the robots were finally deactivated. She would sit there in the fortresses that they were building underground for her and wait and try to crack and just be working on cracking their code. That's what the Artemis aspect of her would do. It would crack their code and put them to sleep. During this time, just before all this started, something called the Odyssey left. It was a space probe that was supposed to go into the distant, reaches of space. And it left, and no one ever found out what happened to it. But it had on it the AI that was the predecessor of Gaia, that had like a complete copy of the kind of code Gaia was going to have. And it launched just before the Pharaoh Plague. And so that comes in later too. But this moment, when Aloy discovers this, she discovers not just that that Operation Zero Dawn wasn't to stop the robots because they couldn't be stopped, but to repopulate the Earth afterwards.
And there was a bunch of other subsystems too, if I remember correctly. Like,
there's Hades, Hades, Apollo, Hephaestus. We're going to get into all of them, but Joe, I think you should be the one to tell what happens to Elizabeth Sobeck and then what happens after that.
No, please go ahead.
All right, I'm going to do that then. Elizabeth Sobeck sets up the program, gets it built. She's the one who deals with Ted Farrow all the time. She's the only one who can. He's gone into kind of a paranoid, nutty state, and she's the only one who can deal with him. She's the one who can rein him in. But he keeps insisting on updates, and she keeps him out of the loop. Like, you're paying for it, and that's it. But as they're progressing, as they're getting Gaia programmed, as they're getting the bases built to survive Zero Dawn, a terrible thing happens. The main base where Gaia herself is kept, there's a sealing process that will close the door with only like a 0.00013 micron gap, so that they won't be detected by the Pharaoh Plague and then just destroyed. Because the plague is just destroying everything. It's incorporating all artificial things into itself. It's eating everything that's alive to turn into fuel. It's just like, that's what it's doing. It doesn't seem to understand that there's ever a point to stop.
Yeah, it doesn't understand that it's going to burn itself out because it's not designed to.
Yeah. So, I mean, the Pharaoh Plague is like, everyone was afraid that AIs were going to destroy the world, but it turns out that the thing that isn't an AI is what's going to destroy the world. The Pharaoh Plague has no intelligence.
And the AI is going to be what actually saves the world.
But unfortunately, the seal is misaligned. And because it's misaligned, the tolerance is too great and the Pharaoh Plagues will detect it unless somebody physically goes outside and resets the door. That person will not be able to come back in. And so all the people on the project are sitting around a table arguing who's going to go out there. What are we going to do? While they're doing that, Elizabeth puts on a suit, goes outside, and reseals the door. And basically, when they're like, "No, we'll reopen." He goes, "Don't you even think about it. This is done. Now it's your job to get this program to work, to get everything ready, so that when Gaia finishes, all these different things we've done can be passed on to our heirs, so they can learn about the world, so they can know the mistake that almost wiped out all life forever, and that did wipe out all life for a time."
And that's what they do, right? So that's what Zero Dawn was. And throughout your exploration, you do find out, like, I think Alloy winds up going to the actual orbital launch base where all this happened.
Mm-hmm.
And gets inside and finds that there's a vast underground system of databases and factories and cloning facilities controlled by Gaia. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And that now this is where we learn that once all life has been extinguished because they had to wait for it to burn out, that Gaia would basically deploy countermeasures to deactivate all the Pharaoh robots. But not only that, but to build its own robots to restore the Earth's biosphere. So all those friendly robots that you start seeing out there in the world going around, that's kind of where they started from.
Yeah, that's the Hephaestus.
That's the Hephaestus
sub-program. Yes. It is basically her forge. However, we come back to Ted Farrow.
Yes.
Without Elizabeth Sobek around to keep him reined in, Ted Farrow, and keep in mind, Ted Farrow actually he did one good thing. He insisted that when she made Gaia, that she put a kill switch in. She didn't want to do that because Gaia was like a child to her. She was like, "This is an actual intelligent being. This is a child. I'm not going to put a bomb in a child's head." And it was Gaia who said, "No, look at what's happening in the world. You absolutely should put a bomb in my head."
Which is why Hades existed.
No, Hades was the bomb for the whole world.
Well, that's a different thing. That's a different thing.
No. Yeah. But so they put a kill switch in Gaia. But as a result of that, something will happen later. But after Elizabeth went out and died, Ted was like, he kind of started losing it. Because let's face it, he was responsible for the destruction of the world. That's, he went from, he went from the guy, they used to call him the man who saved the world. That was his nickname. That's what they called him in media. This is a guy who had if you took all the rich billionaires we have now and you made them one person, that's how rich and powerful he was. And now the world was ending because of him. And he went off the rails here. One of these sub-programs of Gaia was called Apollo. Joe mentioned her before. Apollo was a complete database of absolutely everything they could think to store about humanity.
Apollo's purpose was to reteach humanity. So once that the first human clones were sent back into the world, Apollo's entire purpose in life, or entire purpose in creation, was to basically bring them up to speed and also teach them not to repeat the same mistakes that they just made. But this is where I think Matt was going with Ted Farrow. Yeah. So basically, Ted Farrow kind of freaks out, sabotages Apollo, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, he makes sure that Apollo does not have the information. He wipes it,
which then in turn causes humanity to not be able to recover to its full societal potential, but instead
starting over.
they're starting over. The cradle-born humans were reduced to tribal subsistence societies.
Because here's the thing too, the Apollo was also what was going to raise the children from birth.
Mm-hmm.
And so they had these nanny programs set up, but the nanny programs couldn't give them anything. They couldn't teach them anything. So they just fed them and took care of them like children, because that's all they had until they were like 18. And then their programming basically said, okay, out you go, and started just putting them out into the world without any tools, without any ability to like survive. They had to figure all that out themselves. So a lot of them died, obviously. And then the crashes shut down because that was all they were supposed to do. And that's the reason there were robots running around the world being animal robots is because they didn't want to put all the animals out at once. They had to rebuild the biosphere. Rebuilding a biosphere is not easy, especially 1,000 years or so after it got destroyed. You have to figure out what microbes do we put down first? What plants do we put down first? What animals do we put down first? And all of that stuff was in Apollo that the dumbass just destroyed. So, and he didn't just do that, because that would have been horrible. But the people who were the board members of Zero Dawn could have fixed it. They could have at least ameliorated it. They could have put in something. Maybe they wouldn't have had like all the data of all the world, but they would have been able to put in, here's what happened. Here's what we, the individuals here who are all experts in our field, including the people who put together that library in the first place, here's what we can give you. And it would have been something. So Ted had them all murdered. He had put backdoors in because all of the computers and all of the stuff there was Farrow Industries tech. He'd put in physical backdoors. He'd learned from his mistake with the Pharaoh Plague. So he put in backdoors, and then one day when they were all discovering that he destroyed the Apollo thing, he killed them. He literally turned on the airlock in their mountains fortress and asphyxiated them all. So now the people who were behind Zero Dawn weren't there to fix Apollo or provide any of that information. Still, even with that loss, Gaia pulled it off. Gaia shut down the Pharaoh Plague using her Artemis program. Gaia set up power plants using her Zeus program. Gaia killed everything in the world a couple of times using her Hades program, because when you're trying to rebuild a biosphere, you have to try and fail a couple of times. So they built in Hades. Hades was the world clearing property. When activated, Hades would shut off Gaia's kind, motherly nature and turn into a destroyer.
It was a controlled extinction event in case that the world could not be recovered.
Yeah, and they would take it back down to stock and try again.
Yep.
But Gaia obviously was not suited to that. Gaia was built to be a nurturer. So they needed a program that would take over. And so everything was fine up until the thing that happened around the time that Aloy was born. You want to cover this one?
I actually don't remember this unless we're talking about the signal that took over Hades.
That is what we're talking about.
Okay. So basically there's a recording that gets left behind by Gaia that you wind up finding as you play through. It reveals that there is a signal of unknown origin that actually caused Hades to activate.
Not just Hades, everybody.
Everybody.
All the subordinate programs, except possibly Apollo, because I don't think Apollo did anything at this point.
I think that is correct. Basically, but also it was also in order to seize control of all of her functions. As a last resort, Gaia tried to self-destruct in order to stop Hades.
And it would have worked, except that all of them were unshackled by the event.
So they're all loose on their own.
Mm-hmm.
And so what wound up happening is, without Gaia able to maintain the process of what's going on, everything began to break down. And as a contingency plan, Gaia created a clone of Dr. Sobek in the form of Aloy, in the hope that she would find Gaia's message, destroy Hades, and restore the rest of the functions to complete the terraforming process and save the world.
It's actually really touching, because it's very clear that despite the fact that Elizabeth Sobek was just a normal human woman, that to Gaia, Elizabeth Sobek was her mother.
Mm-hmm.
And so when presented with a situation that she couldn't deal with, Gaia turned to Mom, because Mom would fix it. Because Elizabeth proved throughout her life that she would fix it, whatever it took to fix it. However bad that fix was going to be, she'd do it. So it's an interesting scene. Go Go ahead.
I was going to say, and there's more stuff that winds up coming out of this too. It is a very interesting scene, but we also start learning more about like the cult as well, where Silence, which is the person that Alloy's been working with to help uncover the stuff, admits that he was the original founder of the Eclipse cult, and that he was tempted by Hades' promise of knowledge.
Yeah.
Like this is an AI tempting people to a cult to reawaken and destroy the world by promising them forbidden knowledge, which wouldn't have been as tempting of an offer had Mr. Nihilist Ted Farrow there not killed everybody and destroyed Apollo.
Yeah, and the thing is interesting too is that Silence, ultimately, the reason Silence is working with Aloy here is because unlike everybody else in the world, since Aloy has Elizabeth Sobek's DNA, all the locks on all these ancient relics, all these ruins, are keyed to open for her because she was project head. So that's the reason Gaia, chose her in the first place. The reason she brought back Elizabeth Sobek was because Elizabeth Sobek would have root access, and so Silence couldn't get into any of this without Aloy. Aloy is the one who can actually go into these things. He's wanted to do this his whole life, but he couldn't. Like, he could never get past the defenses, but she just walks in. And so there's interesting tension between the two of them. She doesn't give a rat's behind for what he's talking about. And he's frustrated as heck with her because she's all concerned about her personal life, her mother, where she comes from. And he's like, don't you get it? That you don't matter. All this matters. All these things we're finding out the truth about everything we've known in our lives, and that we're in terrible danger. That last part you really should be focusing on. We are in terrible danger because Hades was designed to take the world back to rootstock. Just burn it down. Okay, start over. But when the beam came and the signal hit Gaia, Hades activated and no longer was subordinate. So he was going to take over and kill everything, and then he'd just leave it dead. Because that was what he was programmed to do.
Yeah,
he was programmed to kill everything, and then Gaia would take it back, but now he wouldn't be take-backable. He was no longer restrainable. That's why she blew herself up, because that was the only way to stop him at this point.
And not only that, but he was also going to reactivate the Pharaoh bots, essentially.
No. That's not what he was going to do then. That's what he's doing now.
Yes.
Yeah. Because he can't do it anymore. Because when she destroyed herself, he was cut off. He doesn't have access to Gaia anymore. He can't control any of this stuff. All the other functions, like the Artemis function, doesn't want to destroy everything. The Hephaestus program doesn't want to destroy everything. The Demeter program wants to make more life. None of them want to do what he wants to do. So in order for him to kill everything, he needs another way to do it. And that's where the Pharaoh robots come in. That's why he's got the Eclipse digging them up. That's why he's using them. He's controlling them to do what he wants done. And what he needs is the Horus. The Horus is the big one that can self-replicate. He needs a Horus so he can build more, so he can actually have the Pharaoh Plague again. And that's what he has found in Meridian. So that's the reason the Eclipse are there, the reason they think they're working to take over the kingdom and be like rulers again. They're not. They're all going to die. They're all fodder. It's all about Hades reactivating the Pharaoh Plague. And the only one who can stop them is Aloy, because she is the only one who can access any of the devices that can be used to prevent Hades from doing it. It is when you get to the point where you find this out, I don't know if we can really sell it to you. Because you're just hearing us talk about it, but when you get to see the scenes, when you get to watch the videos that she is watching, when you get to explore these ruins and see it happening, you realize the scale just keeps changing.
And that's one of the things that I think the game does really well, and which is also why I put this in I honestly put this in my top 10 easily.
Yeah, it's that good.
It's the way that it gives the story to you up until the very end, up until. Which we will talk about before we leave. Because we're coming up on time. But it's that sort of like, again, like Matt's saying, the scale keeps shifting, but it keeps shifting in what I would call, I don't want to say a reasonable way, but it's something that is believable. It's as you're finding out more, your worldview shifts. And that's exactly what would happen. And it fits perfectly with what happened with Apollo being destroyed, with all that information being lost, and with humanity being reduced to that tribal society. Their worldview is also very narrow and is being forced to shift as well, because they don't really have a choice. They haven't had a choice up until this point. And up until the last moments are in the base game, because we're not talking about the expansion yet, because we don't have that much time. But we find out that now that we learn that Hades has been unshackled, we learn that he's trying to just burn everything to the ground. And there's this moment where you basically I believe you stab Hades, the system, with Silen's lance, and you have to activate a master override, ending the war. But here's, to me, where the most gut punch stuff happens, right? Two things really happen in this moment that sort of shift everything, because after all this, after quote unquote saving the world, the view shifts back down to Aloy's personal journey. And so what does she do? She journeys to Dr. Sobek's old home, and she finds Dr. Sobek's body. And it's been there for however long it's been at this point.
About 1,000 years.
About 1,000 years. And then she mourns the loss of her predecessor, realizing the sacrifices she made to get humanity to where they are. And it's a very cinematic moment, and it's a very touching moment, because Aloy now knows where she came from and kind of has an idea of who she is supposed to be now. And it's that moment of realization that everything coalesces down into. So you get small picture to big picture, back down to small picture. And
yeah, basically, like, one way I would like to liken it is, imagine if you imagine the story as continuously climbing a mountain, continuously climbing it. You're always going up. You're forever shifting from the perspective of this place to that place to that place up there. But when you finally get to the end, it is at the bottom again. You are now going down the mountain. And that has implications for a lot of things, but it also ties well into the next gut punch, which I'm going to let Joe talk about, because it's a doozy.
The last gut punch comes in a post-credit scene, and it's where we see that Hades is not actually dead. The AI system is still alive, but is trapped by Silence, who is interrogating, or at least intends to interrogate, Hades to find out who originally sent the signal that activated it and decoupled it from the rest of the systems.
Yeah. Who freed all the subordinate programs? I'm going to just real fast.
Sure.
The Frozen Wilds, which is the DLC. I'm not going to bother going into the whole story, but it involves that Project Firebreak that Farrow did in the 2040s. And it involves the AI, Cyan, I believe she's called, who was in charge of it. And she gets invaded back when Aloy was born, when the programs all freed themselves. She got invaded by Hephaestus. Hephaestus isn't out to destroy the world and scourge all life, but he hates humans, because Hephaestus' whole job is to make the machines that do the terraforming, and humans have been hunting them. Now, Gaia understood it. She understood that they were doing the best they could and trying to get resources to stay alive, so she made allowances for it. Hephaestus does not make allowances for it. They're wrecking his machines. He's making these machines to do his job that he was made to do, and they're wrecking them. So that's why they go hostile. The reason that the machines all went hostile right around the time Aloy was born is because Hephaestus is furious that they won't stop hunting them. So I wanted to put that in there. That's just one consequence of one of the subordinate AIs who isn't Hades. And we know the others are all out there too, all doing stuff. But we don't know who sent that message. Silence wants to know who sent it. I have my suspicions, but I don't think we have time for that.
I don't think we have that time. But that is a rather brief overview.
Oh yeah, we boiled this down.
We had to. We could be here for a long time. There's a lot in this game, and this is one of those games that I will highly recommend that you, if you get a chance, take the time to play it. If you
don't just take the time to play it. If you play it,
take the time.
Play it.
Yes.
Yeah. Don't just go in and play it and go, okay, I'm going to just get to the end. No, absolutely do not do that. Explore everything. Pretend that this is a well-made Bethesda game. Like, you know how Bethesda games are always really cool after like several years of patches? Imagine you got a game that does not need several years of patches. It's just good. That's what this is. Just go everywhere. Every time you see something that even remotely interests you, go over there. Go ahead and find that weird set of armor that's like in a cave that you have to do all this crazy stuff to unlock. It's definitely worth doing all the crazy stuff to unlock it. Read everything.
Yeah, read everything, interact with everything. It's one
Watch
of those.
all the videos.
Watch all the videos.
There's tons of videos to watch. Watch them.
It is honestly something that I would recommend you take the time, especially. This is one of those rare instances. Like normally, I won't tell somebody if you plan on playing the sequel, play the original, because generally the sequel will kind of catch you up. This is one of those rare instances where I'm sure the sequel will catch you up or do its best to do so to welcome players that haven't played it before. But this is one of those things where I think it might be best served if you have the time and the gumption to sit down and play the original game. It's usually very reasonably priced. It is available on PC as well as the PlayStation, PS4, and PS5. It looks absolutely gorgeous on the PS5. Like I've re-downloaded it to play through it again and uploaded it upscaled it to 4K, and it is an absolutely jaw-dropping game for something that came out in 2017.
Yeah, it absolutely is.
And it's like that. Apparently, it's like that on PC as well. I don't know, but
even on the janky PS4, and I'll just say this: PS4
it was gorgeous on the PS4. Yes,
even on the janky PS4, it's gorgeous. I mean, I only own a PS4 because I wanted to play this game and God of War, and I didn't end up liking God of War that much. I didn't think it was bad, but it didn't grab me. But this game grabbed me. Like, oh my God, this game was worth the price of getting a PS4.
Yeah, and I will echo that. But just all that to say, if you have the time and the opportunity, sit down and give this game a play. It's well worth your time. You get a lot of gameplay out of it for a very cheap price at this point.
Yeah, and there's characters we're not even mentioning. Like, we didn't really talk about Arend very much.
Mm-hmm.
We barely mentioned the whole Sundom King thing, which is a character who is pretty fascinating, and he's voiced by Joss Keaton.
Yes.
So Anduin, when you hear Anduin talking, macking on this girl, and she's like, "I have no time for you," it's quite funny. There is so much in this. So many characters. Sometimes they're characters who learn from their experiences, like Lanza does. Sometimes it's just for finding out. You get to find out why Rost was in exile, and right there, that quest, which is completely not related to the storyline at all. It's just something that you can have Aloy do. It's enormous. It's great. It's just a wonderful. The whole thing is good. But I'm going to have to shut up. I'm going to forcibly make myself shut up now so we can leave, because otherwise we're going
to be here for a while. But thank you very much, folks. Thanks for all of you that recommended that we do an episode on Horizon Zero Dawn. Hopefully this has satisfied at least some of your curiosities. And as a reminder, Blizzard Watch is made possible due to the generous contributions at patreon.com/BlizzardWatch. Your continued support means this podcast site and community is able to thrive and grow. Blizzard Watch supporters enjoy exclusive benefits like early access to the podcasts, a better chance at having your question answered on our podcast or the queue, and an ads-free site experience. And as always, I do want to remind you that Blizzard Watch stands with the employees of Activision Blizzard, as well as all game companies out there, in demanding change for a better tomorrow and a safer work environment for the employees. But thank you very much, folks. We'll see you next week.